Okay, we are on recording in progress. We are on the microphone, so I will call to order the Tuesday, March 17th meeting of the Monmouth City Council and ask our city recorder, Pam Phyllis, for the roll call, please.
Councillor Belts,
Here.
Councillor Carey,
Here.
Councillor Lopez,
Present.
Councillor McKeel has been excused. Councillor Oberst,
Here.
Councillor Ridgway,
Here.
Mayor Kuntz.
I am here, and if you would join us and stand if you can, I'll ask Councillor Ridgway to lead us in the flag salute. Thank you. Tonight for the consent calendar, we did have corrected minutes of the February 17th council meeting and minutes of the March 3rd city council meeting. And unless there are additional changes or additions, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'd move approval. Second.
Thank you, Councillor Carey, for the motion and Councillor Lopez for the second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That brings us to public comments this evening, and public comment portion of the agenda is an opportunity for the council to listen to community members. Councils may ask clarifying questions of the speaker, but will not engage in dialogue. Speakers are allowed 3 minutes to present information relative to city business, whether it is listed on tonight's meeting agenda or not. Councilors may come to a consensus to ask the city manager to research and respond at a future time or schedule a future agenda on the topic. Speakers should provide contact information on the form if they wish follow-up, and anyone may submit written comments at any time, which will be shared with all councilors. So this evening, we do have some public comment, and I will call you up. Please, again, work the microphone there. I will ask our city recorder to start the timer after the person gives a name and residence. And I think, are you running the timer? Yeah, okay. All right, so first this evening, Joan Bostrom.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. We're having an issue with our timer.
Okay, are we gonna take a second? Can we fix it? All right, sorry, thanks. We'll just wait and get that fixed.
Are you ready?
We're just gonna wait till they get the timer ready to go here.
Thank you for making sure that we got to say our name and address before we were timed.
Sure.
We're just gonna use our phone.
All right, they will use their phones if you just want to quietly give the 1 minute signal to each speaker, that would be great. Thanks.
May I speak on behalf of John Moore first? I had a written authorization for him.
We'll allow that tonight. Typically, we don't do that. Folks that are not able to attend are welcome to call in and give their comments themselves or submit written testimony. We typically don't do that. I'll allow it tonight, but that's not typical for us to have others speak on behalf of folks. So go ahead so you're speaking for John Moore.
Right. His
And-
address is 10995 Mistletoe Road, Monmouth, Oregon, 97361. And I am Joan Bostrom, 14920 Ferns Corner Road, Monmouth, Oregon, 97361. A quote from the Polk County Comprehensive Plan 06/06/2012 to present. And Monmouth is a part of Polk County, so I think this is appropriate. Quote, in 1973, the Oregon State Legislature adopted Senate Bill 100, and for the first time, citizen participation in the local decision-making process became mandatory. It is now the right of every citizen to be involved in the preparation of plans, to have her ideas considered by decision makers, and to have decision makers respond to these ideas on local land use and comprehensive planning. It is also the responsibility of every citizen to exercise these rights. A strong citizen involvement program is felt to be essential. Thank you.
All right, and we'll reset the timer. That was Mr. Moore's comment. And if we can reset the timer for Ms. Bostrom's.
Complaints that the western portion of Monmouth were being ignored, penalized, came to my attention. So I drove the western section of the city. Growth. Unwanted growth, some would complain. Section 8 housing, homeless housing, crammed in housing. And for example, in the northwestern area, 126 three-story apartments are newly built off of Riddle and Hoxton, with another 126 planned for next year. And I wondered, how will Monmouth facilities accommodate this current growth, let alone future growth? So I chose one public works, maybe the ugliest, the sanitary sewers. The combined sewer system and rainwater sanitary system is an older system, and it backs up and eventually goes into the creek. On 12/19/25 and 3/4/26, there was overflow into Ash Creek. I'm doing a quote. The state only allows 4 events per year. Our average lately, 7 to 10. Ouch. The Monmouth Comprehensive Plan quote, Monmouth does not have sufficient lagoon capacity to hold treated wastewater during summer months. Oops, or should we say double oops, winter and summer. Again, the comprehensive plan, 1.4 million in debt financing is needed, plus another 14.75 million debt financing is needed for sewer upgrades. Existing Monmouth citizens.
1 minute remaining.
I'm sorry. Sewer rates charged monthly will necessarily increase to handle the problems of growth. And bonds will have to be issued, causing the increase in the sewer rates. In our transparent body, we need to advise the citizenry of the true costs of what faces us on the sewer system. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, and Tyler Walker, if you'd like to come up, and again, pressing the button and the red light comes on, meaning you're on. And once you state your name and residence, we'll have them start the 3-minute timer.
My name is Tyler Walker. I live at 1461 Glaze Meadow Street, Monmouth, Oregon, 97361. So I'm here tonight to address the language on tonight's agenda, which is actually in the future agenda items. The language says LA 25-02 comp plan amendment approval. So I want to assume the best of the city council and will assume that non-approval remains an option for the city council on the upcoming meeting for April 7th, 2026. While this issue may not be new to you and your staff, it's new to us, the residents of Monmouth, who would be directly impacted by this proposed UGB expansion if approved. And those of us most directly affected by this proposal first learned about the plans just days before the comment deadline. Moving past the shock, we have researched to try to understand where this is coming from. We discovered that this all started in 2025 during the legislative session. As regular citizens, how are we supposed to know that a bill to specifically allow the city of Monmouth to bypass the state UGB expansion process the UGB expansion process was under consideration? There are thousands of bills introduced each session. At what point was this discussed and shared with the residents of Monmouth, informing them that the city was advancing this legislation? Furthermore, a notice was posted on the city website on December 30th, 2025 for a commission meeting in January and a vote in February. That does not seem like adequate time for engaging the public on what this change actually was, why it is needed, and what impact it will have on our community. What were you doing on December 30th, 2025? Were you looking for public notices on government websites? As you well know, your constituents were not. Maybe we will find out the notice. Maybe we will find out the notice met the letter of the law, but they obviously did not meet the intent of the law. The intent is to ensure that the public has access to all the information under consideration, plenty of the opportunities to ask questions and provide feedback, and our perspective as residents to our elected officials before a decision like this is made. We appreciate that you held up the vote once when we had 125 people in a panic questioning what was happening. However, then we still don't really have very many answers. I refuse to believe that represents the collective values of this city council. Please pause and start over. Hold community meetings with good maps. Let your residents engage authentically, and then listen to us as you make the best decision for this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Yes, I will say, although we don't typically engage, that approval is not a given there. So sorry that wording is used. Remind our staff that still is a decision is intended to be made, but doesn't have to be. So thank you. And our last public comment from David Pastor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is David Pastor. I live at 11100 Mistletoe Road in Monmouth, Oregon. My topic is the number 4. On April 7th, if just 4 of you city councilors vote no on a subject that I cannot name, you will make us very pleased. But before I discuss 4, I have to talk about a few other numbers first. President Woodrow Wilson was noted for his brief speeches. A member of Congress praised him and asked him about the time it took him to prepare them. He said, "It depends. If I speak 10 minutes, I need a week. If 15 minutes, 3 days. If 30 minutes, 2 days. If an hour, I'm ready now." Brevity takes work. Wilson never said how long he might require for a 3-minute speech. Perhaps he thought 3 minutes too little time. That's my contention. 3 minutes is just not enough time for complex issues. Now, I know that the number 3 is significant in our culture. 3 strikes, you're out. Third time charm, 3 branches of government, and the singing group, 3 Dog Night. However, a strong case can be made for the number 4. 4 bases in baseball, don't forget home. Scientists recognize 4 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. And we have 4 directions. And how many members were in one of the greatest rock bands of all time, the Beatles? 4. Now, I asked tonight for a very simple thing, 4 minutes for each public comment. And as it related to the subject, I asked for 3 other actions, but I'm not unclear in the first one. I'm not sure if city councilors can question citizens after their 4 minutes. If they cannot, I think that you should be able to, so that we will have the same privileges that the staff enjoy. And number 2, I'd also ask that the dreaded timer, when it's working, will be started for staff presentations, so that we can see how long the staff take to give their presentations on issues and matters of not on every issue, but on ones that are very important. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. My last request is that one of you councilors will be so bold as to make the motion to try 4 minutes for citizens to speak for 4 months. I think you might be surprised how pleased that would make people be. Now, I probably will be done under 3 minutes, and you might say, how could I do that? Well, it's a very simple issue. If you ask me about the unnamed topic, I will need 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, tonight we start with a presentation and we have some guests here this evening. So I will call up Ben Bobita, maybe or maybe not Travis Young. All right. Ben, thanks. You introduce yourself for folks who don't know.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Ben Bobita. I'm the executive director. I have the privilege of being the executive director of the Gate Youth Association. The Gate is a 501c3 nonprofit. A little bit. All right. Usually I'm plenty loud, but I wouldn't want anyone to not hear me, you know? Yeah, the Gate is a 501c3 nonprofit based here in Monmouth Independence, really a grassroots organization that started in 2005. And the idea was kind of birthed out of the First Baptist Church, but it quickly grew to be much bigger than that. We started serving the teens then, 1 day a week. Many of you might also be familiar with the ministry called Church Lunch, which has happened since 1989. And so long story short, we raised money for 15 years. And in 2019, we were able to start to work on the current youth center today, where it is, and finished that in 2020. And so we have grown by 300% in 4 years since 2020 and 21 when that was started. I remember the first day we had 50 kids in an afternoon. Our main outreach is our after school program, where we are now open to 6th through 12th graders. As of today, we see about 130 to 150 kids every day. So I remember the first day we saw 50 kids. So that's where the 300% growth number comes in. So after school, we invite kids in. We want them to be known, to be encouraged, and to encounter Christ's love. Most of the kids who come are not people of faith with no religious background. We're open to kids of all cultures and all social groups. So when kids come to the Gate, they get fed. Last year, we did 17,000 meals between our after school program and our lunch programs. So every kid can get fed after school. They get snacks after school. We also have 3 lunches, and that's where we've really found that the high schoolers connect the best. We had dreams early on of high schoolers coming on Friday nights and Saturdays, have tried that, hasn't really worked out. But we see about 250 different high schoolers come every week for lunch, about 130 to 150 at church lunch on Tuesdays, where a group of 14 women from the community prepare 5 different meals, kind of a rotation through that. So there was 135 kids there today. We have a Bible study on Thursdays that we see over 50 kids come to. And then Fellowship of Christian Athletes for Central High School happens on Fridays, and they have about 50 kids a week there as well. So there are kids who come all 3 days, but there's definitely some change up in who comes. We do a lot of other things. Our programs have really grown over the years. We haven't just grown in numbers, we've grown in what we do. So we have academic support 3 days a week where we actually do homework help and have our staff available for that in a room that's set aside. We have a mentoring program. So right now, I think we have about 35 kids being mentored an hour a week, mostly by staff members, some by community mentors. And the community mentors is really the direction we're hoping to grow as we don't have money just to pay everyone to mentor kids. But I do believe that every kid needs a mentor, and we've seen probably our deepest impact in kids who are being mentored, an hour a week, having an adult connect with them that's not their parents, speak into their life, and that's been really good. We do clubs, and so some of our school year clubs, you might know we have an automotive mechanics program, so we have 3 automotive mechanics clubs. We have a couple other workforce development clubs. We do a barista club in the summertime, and then we do culinary. So the high school and middle school, as far as I know, don't have any culinary that happens. Our clubs are full every time we open up the kitchen to kids. They want to cook and they want to eat what they cook, generally, unless they're really bad. But That said, so we partner with Acres of Hope. You might have heard of that ministry out in Rickrell. So we send a group of kids out there to do archery and horsemanship and learning about horses on Tuesdays. We have a 3D printing club. We have a guitar club, so we do some stuff with music, and we do crafts every day. So in the gate, there's 3 main spaces. One is our commercial kitchen where we serve food for the kids and teach the kids to cook. We have a gym. So right now, all the kids eat in the gym. So we call that the food zone. It's kind of a messy business, playing and eating next to the volleyball court. As you can imagine, we wash the stains off the wall sometimes, or give a kid a change of clothes. We play a lot of basketball, a lot of dodgeball, and just hang out in that space. We also have what we call the game room. So we have several video game consoles. The crafts are in there, the 3D printers in there, all of that stuff. So what we found is it's grown so fast and we've had so much community support that we're full. The spaces are very full. When you get over 130 kids a day, it feels very full in those spaces. You can't make a phone call in those spaces because it's just so loud. You have to go outside, right? We don't have room to mentor kids inside. Our mentors will go sit under the trees outside, etc. So long story short, a couple years ago, I wrote a 5-year plan for our organization. And in the 5th year, I thought, hey, maybe we could think about adding on. And a local donor who's been very supportive of the gate, they said, well, let's just move right up to that year and I'm going to give you $1 million. And so we were given $1 million. And then literally just a month later, a foundation in Portland said, hey, we have some extra money, ask us for $1 million. So we did, and they gave us $500,000 for our building campaign. So that's kind of really moved that up by 4 years, which is really amazing. So at this point, we have a $2.3 million plan for our Expanding the Hope building project. That's going to add on some offices. Right now, we have 4 desks in an 8.5 by 13 office, and then a couple of my staff sit outside that space. So we're going to add on 3 offices, which are not the fun space necessarily, unless you ask the staff. But we are excited to also do mentoring, do counseling in those spaces like we did before we got so busy. We are going to add on a new game room. And so a lot of the existing game room will move into that space, allowing us to secure some of our equipment and whatnot on the weekends. In our existing game room, we become a cafe style eating zone. And so we can feed the kids in the afternoon. A lot of the lunches will still happen in the gym because of the numbers. And then we're going to add 2-story classrooms. So if you've been on the First Baptist property in the gate, you've seen this courtyard. So that's going to be 2 classrooms downstairs and 1 upstairs that will serve our faith-based youth groups in the evenings. We're talking about having a high school only space in the afternoons. We see about 30 high schoolers a day, but we know that they would appreciate some space away from the 6th graders. We did ask our high school advisory team, what do you think we should change? They said, make the 6th graders go away. And we said, we're not going to do that, but how about we can maybe give you your own space? And then in those classrooms, we'll have academic support, mentoring, 3D printing, all the crafts, all the music, and have some spaces that are a little quieter for those kids who are sensitive in that way. So we're excited about this campaign that we're doing. Basically, we have 1.9 million. We have a Murdoch grant out for 225 that we should find out in May. And then we've decided to raise 200,000 locally. And we've been very blessed to raise 100,000 in 3 months. So we're halfway there, and we do have some pledges and whatnot that we're also working on. So yeah, be thinking with us as we continue to raise the second half of those funds. We are on track, I believe, to break ground in May. And so that's pretty exciting. Dalkey is our builder and Facet Architects is our architect. So anyway, so super exciting. Obviously, we're just looking for more community support and for the community to understand what's going on. We're excited to serve all the teens of Monmouth Independence, no matter, again, what friends group or culture group they come from. And I would say I've been pleasantly surprised that the gate really does represent. If you see a group at Talmadge or at Central, they're probably also at the gate and maybe interact more together at the gate than they do at school in some ways. And so that's just been a neat thing to see over the last 5 years. So yeah, we do have our annual gala coming up on April 10th. It's the best place to learn about the programs the gate is offering. So if you want to come have a cheap date and a free dinner on April 10th, we'd love to see you there. You're all invited. And yeah, I don't know if there's any questions or if we have time for questions, but you can always ask me now or ask me later. So, but that's what we're doing and we're having fun.
Any questions for Ben or comments?
I just say thank you. I mean, you're providing a wonderful service to a lot of kids and some that need it more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you've gone the test of time with the church lunches. My kids went to the church lunches, or my daughter, and back when it was in the church. But that is a wonderful place for the youth of our community to gather. And especially right now, they need that kind of a place, especially with the guidance that you all provide. So Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a privilege for sure.
Sir Ridgway?
I won't add a whole lot, but just, the need that you're meeting there with our youths, our community's youth is tremendous. Having entities outside of a school setting where kids can find connection, something that's sorely needed for all of us, but especially at that developmental stage, is amazing to have here in our community, and just the I'll just say miracles that you've experienced with the funding pouring in is a definite. It shows that you're heading in the right direction. So I applaud your efforts and all the work that you put in and your staff. Keep it up. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for
All right.
coming, Ben.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the presentation. That brings us to our business agenda. No, I have two more presentations. Let's see, how can I do this on microphone? I don't think I have a portable mic. I'm looking at options. Oh, the month of March 2026 is definitely a milestone for the city of Monmouth, as we are going to make some pretty significant changes in not how we serve the public, but who the faces of that public service are. And so tonight, I get the privilege of honoring the service of a couple of our staff members who are retiring. So first of all, I'm going to call up Russ Cooper. Dang it, you're wearing green. I can't even pinch you.
Yeah.
And present this certificate of recognition to Russell Cooper in recognition of your dedicated service to the city of Monmouth as Public Works Director. We honor your 30 years. I thought it was more than that. 30 years of leadership, dedication, and long-term impact on community infrastructure and fun stuff too.
Yes.
Given this Tuesday, March 31st, 2026.
Thank you very much.
And Phyllis Bowman, our city recorder, our historian, our public records clerk, our keep the council on its toes and reminding us of stuff all the time, party planner, decorator, and shortbread cookie baker, the most important. So no, it's not the most important, Phyllis. You have done amazing work for the city. You've been through all the changes, and you have kept doing that with your little elfin smile, your usually good humor, and really a true heart for this community. And so I am honored to recognize Phyllis Bowman in recognition of your dedicated service to the city of Monmouth as city recorder. We honor your 20 years of commitment, hard work, and loyalty, which has greatly contributed to the betterment of this whole community. Thank you, Phyllis. Nancy. And I'd also like to recognize their families in the room. Their spouses are here tonight with us too, because lots of council meetings, lots of extra meetings, lots of community activities. We wouldn't have been able to have them without you. So thank you both very much for coming. And I do want to offer that we do have spots on committees if you need some extra time out of the house now that they're going to be there more. So please, we'll find something for you to do. And now, our business agenda this evening, you will note that we have pulled from consideration the first reading of ordinance 1422 for the Monmouth Independence Trolley intergovernmental agreement. That has been sort of back and forth a few times, but just in the last couple of days, had an opportunity to a couple of fine points that I think deserve some more attention and discussion, particularly between Monmouth and Independence. So we pulled that off. Those of you, John Kerry, who probably read it thoroughly and might have comments that you'd like to make, if you will please forward any comments or notes you had about it to Rochelle, then we will be meeting with Independence and get that back to you. Just a few little tweak things. So that brings us to a discussion about our council goals. And Suzanne's coming on up here, but I am prepared to lead this as well. As again noted, Rochelle is representing the League of Oregon Cities at the National League of Cities Convention in Washington, D.C., where last night she did have to take shelter from the extreme wind event that was happening. They closed the entire federal government yesterday at 2:00, and she reported having a very difficult time walking the quarter mile from their restaurant to back to the hotel. So we're prepared to start this discussion. And I think the first thing, Suzanne, that folks have noticed is that it does mention these goals as being our fiscal year 27-28 goals. That to me, in my mind, the end of the fiscal year is what I use. And so I read this as through the end of July 2027 and July 2028. But other folks don't see that way. So that's one thing we'll want to clarify before we adopt a final plan.
Yep, and that is correct. These are 2-year goals. And you're right, it's for the fiscal year starting July 1st, 2026. And then that the 2-year period would end June 30th, 2028.
So we may go ahead, Councilor Kerry.
I understand that. However, if you go onto our website, you see that we're currently under the 2025 goals. And, that makes sense because that's contemporary. It could be 25, 26. That would make sense. Just so it's understood by the public, but understood by us as well. And, we've kind of gone from a 2-year goal concept to the point where we're kind of doing it every year. And I think we need to think about that a little bit, whether we really need a refresh in that in between or not. That's a different topic than having to do with approving this, but I think that would be a worthy discussion.
Yeah, we can certainly, I heard your concern about the clarity on the website. So just making sure that the website dates match up to what the report is and what we're saying. So we'll take a look at that as well.
So again, the adoption of the goals, and because these don't start until July of 2026, this could be the start of an ongoing process if we don't choose to adopt them tonight. But reminder that we do it this time of year because if we do have things that we want to accomplish in that 26-27 fiscal year, and it is a budget impact, we need to know that now, right? Because we are finalizing the initial budget presentation. So we do want to talk through a few things about this. One of the bigger concerns, I think, is prioritizing. We didn't actually get to that. So if we look at the document that nicely was printed in extra giant large paper for us all, or the one that was attached to your packet, there's blanks under the priority section. So, and Suzanne, I think I want to make sure that you have an opportunity, particularly to talk about, since a couple of these definitely are your area and could be considerable staff investment. I wanted you to specifically talk to us a little bit about yours.
Yeah, that's great. Would you like me to go ahead and talk about those two, housing and economic development? So goals 3 and 4 specifically in the packet. If you want to follow along in there as well as on the table, I'm on page 30 and 30. Yeah, they're both on page 30 there. So the housing goal, we have a lot of great action items that a lot of those flow from our housing production strategy. But as I got to looking at those a little more closely, each one of those are quite a heavy lift in and of themselves. So we're just trying to, as staff, as we put together our budgets and what capacity that we have, given the other workload that we have, make sure we understand kind of what the highest priorities of, in the case of the housing goal area, which of those 4 are really the most important to make sure that we work on in that first fiscal year 27, and then work, certainly if we are able to work faster than what we anticipate, we can bump up timelines, but trying to be realistic in terms of what we can accomplish. So just to kind of quickly review those 4 actions, the first one talks about advancing the creation of affordable housing to meet Monmouth's housing needs by leveraging funding resources, forming partnerships with our nonprofit housing organizations. And this one, since we're kind of already working on a project, a prime example of that is the senior housing project, it really had identified that as the kind of the top priority that we would continue working on in this fiscal year 2027. And just especially in the initial stages of a project development, there's a heavy lift there, right, with staff in terms of trying to line up partners, identifying funding sources to make sure that we have, a robust feasibility study for that. So lots of meetings, lots of coordination that goes on there. So we've kind of understood if we were to kind of continue on the course that we're on now, that kind of rises to the top in terms of ripeness and opportunity that we're seizing on right now. 3.2 speaks to exploring opportunities to create regulatory and financial incentives for affordable housing through our system development charge fees and an expedited permitting process for affordable housing. So again, this is another important strategy, but I think the timing is not quite ripe in this fiscal year 2027. There's some additional master plan update that will need to occur to be able to update SDCs as well. And so it seems to make more sense efficiency-wise if we combine those rather than doing one SDC update and then having to come back under a short period and do another one. So just some economies and scale there. So we kind of have that identified as maybe a 2028 priority that would line up with some of the public works utility master planning updates as well. 3.3 is, this one's been on there for a couple of years, so it's more of an ongoing, it's just our partnership with entities that support education engagement on housing and homelessness in Monmouth. So these are our partnerships, our regional partnerships that we have with organizations such as the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, the Community Action Agency, and working with Polk FCO. So, I think that is, if we're at that level, that we're kind of what we've been doing in the past, that staff is comfortable, we can continue to support that. I think if you, as a council, had envisioned something more involved than that, then we need to clarify that, and so that we understand and make sure that we have the resources for that. So, and then the last one, 3.4, there is review existing housing ordinances to determine if any amendments are needed to promote rehabilitation of existing housing stock. So important strategy. However, this will take a lift in terms of researching, kind of doing an audit on our existing codes and coordinating with our city attorney to make sure that any code changes are done in a way that will not conflict with existing codes that we have, and have that review. So, and taking into account doing some research on what other jurisdictions do for those things. So that identified as more of a fiscal year 2028 in terms of being able to get that. Now, I think we could potentially bump up some of those timelines from the 2028 if we were able to budget some additional resources, but not sure that we have, that would necessarily be a lot of resources to put towards hiring consultants to be able to potentially help with that. And there still would be that staff component to manage that and go through a procurement process. So I think probably would help if I pause there so we could just talk about housing where it's fresh in the mind.
Yeah, let's do that. Thoughts about that prioritization, Councillor Obers?
Les, I thought about the prioritization, but I want to make sure you know and the building department knows. Larry Thornton came to us 15 years ago and asked for the authority to address substandard housing. And we have ordinances on the books, and I just want to make sure that you all are aware of those.
Yeah, we do. And that's actually one of the ones I'm thinking of that the building official has looked at that and said, hey, there are some things in here that may exceed or be a potential legal issues that we're going to want to talk a little bit more about before we actually enforce on. So yeah, some of the language isn't exactly clear. So yes, thank you for putting that out.
For a pretty big stick at that
yeah,
point.
Well, and it was a number of years ago. So
Right.
yeah.
It was also a very big problem, set of units in town. So
sure.
Councillor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you very much, Suzanne, for flagging some of these things in terms of the lift that they will represent. There's a lot here. And I recall the discussion during our goal setting of, acknowledging that, golly, there is a lot here. I applaud the timeline that you've proposed. And I'm comfortable with grouping some of those things for efficiency. I think that's the work that we expect of staff, and I deeply appreciate it. My one tweak here that I have is maybe less of substance and more in spirit. But in the goal area of housing, as I read these action items, I don't know that I feel that the tagline is really reflecting what the action is. And we were told that an opportunity for wordsmithing would be tonight. So I would suggest that instead of the goal area being housing as a description of reduce barriers to affordable housing, I would suggest that better fitting would be reduce barriers to and increase production of affordable housing. I think that's more in line with the action items that have been detailed underneath that goal area. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, that's the subtitle. I had scrolled up and was looking at the actions saying there's nothing about that. I see, in fact, the 3.1 is advance the creation of. So it's just the subtitle, reduce barriers and increase availability or access to affordable housing.
Yeah, and I think the subtitle is something that's been carried over from previous years and used to, accurately reflect the stage that we're in. I think we've moved past that, I think is my point.
Councillor Carey.
To that point, I think it perhaps was once in there and we took it out at one of our refreshes, actually, if I remember correctly. But But I concur completely with the idea of finding ways to increase affordable housing and frankly, all sorts of housing. And one of the things that we need to do, and we've been talking about it for the last month and a half, is the availability of land. And that is sort of obliquely referenced in here, but it's not a deal. And whether that's whether this land exchange goes forward or not, we'll see. Are there other things within the urban growth boundary that we might be able to leverage? I don't know. But land is a key component to this, and places to build. On the one hand, that's new, that's creation of, and to Councilor Lopez's point. I'd also like to take a look for a moment at 3.4. And, I'm trying to determine, I read that sentence, I read it many times and will again, but and Councilor Oberst referenced it, but help me out on housing ordinances that would promote rehabilitation of existing housing. What
Yeah,
might that look like?
I agree. I think it maybe we could use a little bit of more clarification there. But as I read that and understand that in the context of how we've been discussing it, is that we recognize that there are a number of vacant, unoccupied houses and dwellings in Monmouth already. And so, they're already built. So they're the cheapest housing, well, in most cases, if they've been maintained, but trying to help get those occupied because, there's less of a barrier, right? They're already hooked up to city services and those costs of construction are already sunk. So, so figuring out, why those properties are consistently vacant and if there are some potentially enforcement ordinances or other ordinances that would help get them back into production, I think is one of the things that I'd heard. And then, maybe less directly related to that, but as a positive impact of that could also help improve neighborhood livability. We've had some concerns, right, about derelict housing and then it's not being maintained. So I think those kind of two go together in terms of some benefits from looking at that.
I agree. And I've been talking about that for years, it seems, that let's capitalize on what's here. And one of the first things we could do is to start by identifying why it is that they're vacant. Talk to the property owner and say, how come you got nobody in there? There's a triplex that appears to be pretty good, but there's nobody in it. And it may be for a good reason. It may be the rehabilitation piece, or it may be they just don't want to be bothered with a renter. I don't know, but before we can take advantage of that, we kind of need to know where we're headed. When we had the discussion around this particular what ended up being 3.4, there were really, I think, three strands of discussion. And the first one is one we're talking about right now, the housing rehabilitation piece. How do we get, people into homes that are currently vacant? And how can they be, if it's a conditioned situation, how do we bring that up? And how do we help them bring that up? And it's the county that does that. I get that. But somehow we've got to get the people connected. The other prong of that discussion had to do with, and where we really looked at our code was how can we deal with derelict properties? How can we clean up neighborhoods? That hasn't made it in here, and it's not directly housing, but it's related, I think, to housing. There are a number of places that there couldn't be a code written that they would comply to. There's 8 vehicles in the front yard, literally. And I know we've talked, Officer Strack talked about looking at codes and that sort of thing, on how we could do some enforcement on that. And I'm sure they're doing that, but I got the same neighbor that's calling me every month and saying things aren't getting better. And I'd like to be able to report some progress on that. So wherever we can weave that in. And then the third prong, it had to do with the complaints that we get here frequently, and that's RV parking. That is a housing related issue. It doesn't seem to be addressed. It could be a drop down, for 3.4.1. I don't know. I think we can expand and clarify a bit more on that. So anyway, that's it for me. I'm sorry I went so long.
So rewording 3.4 to be more expansive and to some of the different issues, not literally just existing housing ordinances and amendments. And we can do that, of course, adding a broader scope of work, delaying potentially, right? I mean, or breaking it down, and then we have multiple steps that maybe one could be done in fiscal year 27 and the rest in fiscal year 28 is fine. The other thing I think about that, not in the summary sheet that we were all looking at, but on the actual steps, under that item 3.4, it says under the 2026 retreat notes, identify team for this, 3.6, look at city code enforcement for signage. And I'm not sure what that references to. Last year, did we have 3.6? And Councilor Obers?
I have asked the manager could we have a look at the city sign code? Last time it was redone, I was the chair of the planning commission. That was in the early 2000s. I think we have some issues that need to be addressed. I don't think they're huge. Rochelle has asked me to go through the code and point out things that might be a problem. I don't know that belongs in this document. So, this is my council goal. So, yeah, I think that one cannot be in here. As far as the other one you pointed out, I've lost it. Identify a team for this 3.6. I don't know what that's talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that, to be honest.
This spreadsheet
That the
has
staff
been-
portion of it, okay.
Yeah, this spreadsheet is
Expand it.
quick.
A little bit.
So,
Yeah.
Councilor Lopez.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, in preparation for this meeting, I did pull up last year's, and 3.6 is a almost verbatim, this year's 3.4. So I believe in the more detailed notes that I don't have up currently, there were more notes about a team to address this, but some kind of cross-functional answer there seems to be, the path.
Yeah, I agree. This isn't just, right? If we're starting to look at ordinances and we're starting to look at code enforcement, we're starting, even if you take out signage,
right.
this
It's a lot.
isn't just a community development planning issue. So there, and it also, I noticed, says a reference to 3.5 under 3.1. And if we've done away with 3.5 and 3.6, we just need to clean those up a little bit. So.
Okay. And, I've heard us talk about rehabilitating houses. As I mentioned, Larry Thornton came to us and it was about a complex that was in really bad shape. He got numerous complaints from residents and had no power to do anything about it. So he asked for power to do something about it. And what it involved was actually going in and inspecting and saying, you can't rent this unit until this gets fixed. Lo and behold, the whole unit got rehabbed. The whole apartment complex got rehabbed as a result of that. I don't know if we have any complexes like that, but I'd like to think beyond single dwellings and remember that there might be some apartment complexes that need rehabilitation as well to make them truly livable. So not to add anything more to your plate, Suzanne, but just know that that was
Yeah.
the genesis of the thing.
Right. So again, I mean, I think that's the purpose of tonight, right? Is to try to figure out what is most important. Like, are we pushing on the actual production portion of it, that we have something already going and some opportunity? Or do we want to redirect that to look at something different, like focusing our attention on the rehabilitation? So, I mean, I do like and appreciate what the mayor's comment was about. Maybe there's some smaller steps in there so that we can start to diagnose the problem a little bit better, if you will. I mean, it's still a little fuzzy in my mind because now multifamily, single family, like how it's, so which RV parking, so maybe it's understanding the specific issues a little bit better. And then, is it more of just, we need more hours for enforcement? It's not, our laws are fine. We just don't have the man or human power to go out and enforce on these things. Then that's a different issue.
And I would say I'm comfortable with your sequencing here, and that this one is a little bit of a back burner item that you work on as time presents itself. I think production is an important piece of what we're looking at in Monmouth right now. Our rent burden putting us, what is it, 8th in the state in terms of the portion of people's income that goes to rent. That argues that we need some additional housing for workforce. And I'd like to see, our focus go there. But I also know that you can walk and chew gum and juggle about 5 other things at the same time because you're good. But just, I'm not asking for this to suddenly rise to the top of the heap.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's, I didn't mean to say that we don't do any of that. I mean,
No, right.
there
No, and I'm
are
not suggesting.
It's just complaint driven. It's,
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting
see
that.
that, yeah.
Just let's see if we can plug away a little bit of that. Look at the ordinances, figure out what our holes are in enforcement. What things do we need to change to comply with what our attorney tells us makes him comfortable, because that's an important piece, and sort of take it from there.
I'm going to chop this up a little bit, and Councilor Oberst, if you will turn off your mic.
Oh, I will.
Pop in, thanks. So are we good with 3.1, which is the thing that is for the current fiscal year, which is that creation of affordable housing, particularly forming partnerships? The example we have here is the Polk CDC Senior Housing Project and the Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program, the MERL program, which is a statewide program. Are we okay with like those two being top of mind, because they are underway partially, but no. Councilor Ridgway, pop in.
Thank you. So in light of Councilor Carey's comments, and I appreciate the attention that he's receiving from residents that are in his community and our community about properties that are not maintained, that are unoccupied, that are lots of potential for people to occupy them and make use of them. I also appreciate the public comments earlier tonight referencing the current apartment project on Riddle Road, opening 126 some odd units, and then additional units on the burner for next year. So if this is a relatively short-term goal, 27 to 28, to me, I would think this would be a period of time to kind of watch and wait and see what the trends hold for Monmouth in terms of demand and on our housing, and concentrate our efforts on existing derelict properties and things that we can maintain and get into a better working condition to benefit our neighborhoods, so they're not run down. We don't have to also say the broken glass theory playing out in our neighborhoods. And then we still have the current projects moving forward. But my preference would be to reduce how many different projects we're looking at and focusing on, and focus efforts more on what we know we can work on.
Thoughts? And again, the things in 3.1 specifically listed, even if we didn't add anything else, are one of them is a very limited project that's already going forward. The senior housing project is moving forward, right?
It is, but at a snail's pace, to be honest with you, because it's just, we don't have that extra hours in the day to be able to push harder on that to make things happen a little faster. So yeah, there are components of it, like we've applied through the Friends of the Senior Center has applied for some funding to do a feasibility study. So it's still moving forward. It's just not as quickly as it potentially could be just based on some limited capacity issues that we're having. So, yeah.
But that is a single very specific project at this point. The goal is bigger. Hey, if somebody comes up with funding and partnership, let's look at these kinds of things. That's not going to be a subdivision, obviously. That's going to be these smaller type things. And I think that's a good point, Councilor Ridgway, because we can't keep adding big projects to this department. And again, maybe the derelict housing or bringing up our standards is a higher priority, but that also is a huge lift because, as we said, it's looking at ordinances, it's looking at enforcement, it's working with cross departments. So if we move that up, then we're going to impact more than the community development department as well. But Councilor Carey, then Councilor Lowe.
One of the things that I think we can do as this gets, this marinates a little bit, is identify other people. Your name shows up a lot on this, Suzanne, and Rochelle's as well. And you go through, I had a tally at one point, but there's a lot of people that would be involved with that. The code enforcement piece, we've got a portion of the police department that would be working on that. Now, there'd be some leadership and guidance both by the chief and by our community development. So I think I think as we add, instead of project lead, maybe project team or something that would be a little more emblematic of the workloads that are there, because I think we need to protect that. And to Councilor Ridgway's point, regarding, I'm not sure I'm in a position to say I want to just sit and see how things shake out. But I do think that if memory serves, when we were doing the housing production study, that project was not on the list yet. I don't think that is included in that. And I may be wrong, but so
Are
we
you
may
talking
have.
about this rehabilitation of existing housing stock, or?
No, I'm talking about he referenced the
Riddle Road.
the Riddle Road project, 126 units. I don't know that was included in when we developed the housing production strategy, whether I don't think that was that was part of a deficit. So we may have closed the gap a bit on that.
Yeah, I think this gets to the point where, that one of the goals identified as part of their strategy is having that monitoring piece, right? So that we're keeping up with, okay, this is what our 20-year projection is, and here's where we're at. And we're required to provide housing production information to the state on an annual basis. So we'll be able to kind of get that information woven in, I think, with what comes back to the council on that. So the Riddle Road project is just part of our 20-year land and housing needs, right? So, I mean, that's just part of what's being built. The housing production strategy is the specific strategies. They weren't specific housing projects. That was more of the housing needs analysis, not to dive down too much in the weeds, but I just want to clarify that distinction between that. So certainly Riddle Road, the housing that's being built there is part of the needed housing. So it's moving forward to help meet that, but it's not a one and done that yay, check that out, right? This is ongoing. It took that project, goodness, since 2019. So that's shows you a really good picture. And of course, we had COVID in there, so I'll give that. That took a little bit of extra getting that through the planning process. But a lot of that was engineering, utility plan review, revisions, or not wetland permitting. They avoided the wetlands in that case, but floodplain permitting. So there's a really long timeline when you start working around wetlands and in creeks. So I think that's why we have a specific housing production strategy that identifies how can we keep that pipeline going? It's not just oh, it's done. It's just a continual process. So, yeah. And the other thing I didn't mention earlier, to take a little bit of pressure off. I've got to decide the number one priority now that's rigid and set in stone. But as we get into this, it was my goal to have a housing work session with you to go back and revisit those strategies into the housing production strategy so we can get those out, dust those off, and make sure the things that were high priority are still high priority, or maybe things have shifted depending on some new opportunities that are coming up. To your point, Councillor Carey, about what about the land supply, right? That's a big one that we have. So, and part of that, would be, I think, looking at what's been built so far and where we're at in that process. So know that, that I see that this is the year that's ripe to have that work session on there. So then we can make some tweaks and adjustments further based on that.
So maybe we don't really expand on this. We can adopt these and change them, or we can change the housing goal to just talk about a more in-depth review of our housing production strategy, because that will, if we make that our overarching goal, the projects under that will come to be some of these other things. Or do we want these specific things and we want to give timelines, or do we want to, we don't have to adopt this tonight. Everything else, and I think the reason we want to make sure we're focusing on this is because the others are ongoing, or as you can see, there are things that under financial sustainability that have our new finance director's name on them right there. And I think some of those, there's a new one that she added, she wants to work on. So some of that is just going to happen anyway. It's really this prioritization for two of these goals to be a two-person department is a lot. And if we want to adopt the whole plan with or without changes to this, or just kind of pull it back a little bit and have a longer session to discuss, we can. If we're going to make these priorities, what I'm hearing, we need staffing. We need to increase staffing, for example, in that department, which would be a budget impact, which we would need to make that call now. And I don't think any of us, after the meeting the other night, I see a lot of head shaking, is going to talk about increasing staffing. So we need to be realistic here.
I'm wondering if there's language that could be a very general goal with a couple of sub points under it that are, for example, knowing that as the load comes to Suzanne's office, she can work intelligently, as she always does, to prioritize things, to target what she's aware this body sees as a priority. So you can always come back and say, I can do this or I can do that, but I can't do both these things, not right now, and give us the opportunity to weigh in. I trust our staff to interpret at some level what it is we're after. We don't have to spell it out word for word.
Yeah, and to that, I mean, we will have, the quarterly reporting on these as well. And so that's a good check-in point. And then certainly before we take any very involved, committed actions like signing up for the moderate revolving loan fund. That's a policy choice that's going to come to you, right? So that's a checkpoint that we have that don't have anymore. So I think for that work session, I still would advise I'm not a mind reader too. This is a diverse body, so people have different ideas. So I think it's good to make sure that there's consensus on that. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a good list in terms of reflecting the priorities that came out from the housing production strategy that did have a lot of stakeholder input and involvement. But there's some fluidity, right, in terms of new opportunities that come up and being able to seize on those and different funding sources. And so that's what we've been trying to do, be nimble, right? Like, oh, there's some funding to help with housing infrastructure. We know we need infrastructure help, so let's do that. So that's I think where we're at with that.
Councillor King.
I think one of the things that we would benefit from if we were to, and we've had this for, since Friday or Thursday, and we haven't all really been able to drill down and really prioritize. So I think to tap the brakes on it a little bit and give some in-depth thinking and initially, and then beyond that, let's not think of this as a in-stone document and put on the shelf that we quarterly get a report that we've forgotten about. So, I mean, if we could make this more, to your point exactly, if there's a grant that would come up in some area that we haven't said, man, that's our absolute number one, but we can deliver on number 3, because we've got this opportunity, we got to be agile enough to be able to do that. And so to treat this like a living document, I think is a good strategy to have.
Yep, I agree. Councillor Lopez, when she finishes making notes.
Okay. I concur, I think that one thing that is not captured here is the sentiment from council that has existed for a number of years that we have a desire to remain agile. I think that's an apt term. Within that spirit, I think it's something that's recognized but not written down, right? Within that spirit, I believe that staff knows how realistic any of these goals are, all of these goals are in terms of trying to achieve them. I would be interested in hearing, at a future meeting from staff, I think, a menu of options or some suggestions or some suggested verbiage that can encapsulate that agility. We certainly don't want to set goals that aren't achievable. We do want our goals, or at least I want our goals, to be ambitious and reflective of the city values. And sometimes ambitious doesn't mean we're building all the things. Sometimes ambitious means that we're just being, thoughtful caretakers of the things we have. But I'd be interested in seeing this again before we approve anything.
I would say, maybe to paraphrase, I would be interested in you write these goals for us, right? Because again, we could throw out 10,000 ideas, and I think we threw out 5,000 ideas at the goal setting, and I can't believe that Sarah Singer-Wilson's team came up with 4. So I think it is realistic of us to say, how would you describe this in a way that is meaningful to you, including the feedback you heard, which is, to us, housing and livability are kind of intertwined here in ways that we haven't addressed in the words that are here. They may or may not be all community development. We want to make sure we are working on the projects we've already sort of committed to and have already put down a foundation for. But the main thing, right, is as we have other opportunities that meet the overarching goal, we would want to make sure you have the flexibility to reprioritize those. Does that make it worse?
No, I think that's good. I mean, there were some kind of small refinements that we made based on the Sarah Singer Wilson draft that came out to try to help clarify that a little bit. But I think staff could take another run at that, knowing now that we have this input as well is very helpful. And then again, I like to ground it in work that it's not just, oh, this is what I think is a good idea. This came from our community that had outreach and involvement, and linking it back to that and the purpose in our housing production strategy. So yes, so as I understand it, if I heard correctly, the idea is to refine the title under the goal of housing to say, reduce barriers to increase production of affordable housing, and then develop some more flexible language around that of what staff thinks is realistic to these. And I guess one other thing is that if you could also say increase production of needed housing. That is a terminology we throw around, and all housing is needed housing. So that would get at that.
Councilor Oberst.
Just one last quick thing, and I've raised this in the past. We have out there dozens of definitions of what constitutes affordable in housing. And I know the most common one is that the median income in the area spends 30% or less on all aspects of housing, rent, electricity, water, et cetera. If that's the official definition that we're working with, let's make that an official definition that we're working with. So we are on the same page when we say increasing affordable housing. And I just think that's one little loophole that we have left unclosed.
How do you feel about her proposal that we say needed housing?
Needed is, again, yes, absolutely. But on the specific point,
If we don't specifically say affordable, we don't need to define it.
we still need to define it.
I think it's defined in our housing production strategy, which is where it lives.
It's in the housing production strategy.
Councilor Open.
Thank you. One parting comment. One other value that is, implied in this document that is not explicitly stated is that of partnership. And I see partnership, running through a number of these goals as written. I believe that has been part of our key to success in recent years. And, I would just continue to underpin that as we move forward to formalizing these things, since you're going to have an opportunity to go in there and get your hands on everything.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes the Department of Two stretch farther. So yeah, thank you for emphasizing that.
Yeah.
And
that's the kind of overarching goal direction council should be giving instead of specific work plans. One more from Councilor Lopez and Councilor Ridgway.
And then on the note of affordable versus needed, I believe that affordable may be too specific because there are other styles needed. However, I also feel that sometimes being specific is important. And so I think that something as nebulous as needed may not quite hit the nail on the head for me. But I'll leave that as it is. Thank you.
That's all in the housing production strategies. That's good. Councilor Ridgway.
Thank you. This is a comment, I guess, more for everybody that was not part of our strategic goal setting meeting. Just to give a little context. Now, this is the second time that I've been a part of it. Last year, I believe we had 22 or 23 goals or sub goals. And so now seeing that there's 16, that's a combination. It's a collaborative effort. A lot of different ideas came to the table, but an effort to make the goals defined, make sure that they're measurable and something that are actually achievable. We were able to drop some of those off and some completed goals from the last year. So there has been progress made, and I think narrowing the scope allows our staff to be more focused and intentional, and also productive. If you're pulled several different directions, it's really difficult to follow through and complete a task. So I think we're doing well. Maybe next year we'll have this all on one page, but that might be optimistic. We'll see. I'll hope.
Talk about goals, Counselor Machai. All right. You have some guidance and direction. We're not going to adopt this document tonight. We want to give a little bit of time and thought to that because it is big. And again, some of these others are things we're already working on. So thank you, Suzanne, for taking the time with us to go through that. And we'll be back. So that brings us to a work session, which we might need to take a few minute break for the Councilor Lope.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I had just two other general comments on the document, if I may. And these are not specific to housing, but I have, and again, little bit of wordsmithing, but I have a concern about the number of times that the word strategic appears in the staff memo and in the document. These are council goals. This isn't, the C-suite of an organization going in and creating an in-depth, detailed strategic plan. I believe that words matter, and this is goal setting. This is high level. I'd appreciate if we could pull that strategic word. These are council goals, not strategic goals. And I do believe that we are being strategic in our creation of the goals, but that has a defined meaning in the business space, and that's not this. My other comment is related to one other word that kind of gets at me. The term council retreat was included in here. And I believe that was included as a carryover from other communities. I don't view the day that we get together and dig into this as a retreat. Retreat, I believe, evokes images of standing around a campfire and, feeling good about things. As much as I appreciate and would like that, that's not what this is. This is a day of in-depth and dedicated work. And so I would just appreciate it if we could not refer to this. And this is initially listed in the introduction of the document. If we could not refer to the body of work that was done as a retreat, because it misrepresents the work. Thank you.
Okay, I will take that back as well to the, and we'll get with the consultants about reviewing that. Okay, other generic thoughts, if you have them, take them up with or something.
I'm wondering if the retreat referred to the last hour when staff, et cetera, Rochelle left. Just a thought.
I think you're right. It's a commonly used term, which it was a workshop. It's a working strategy meeting. So.
Goal setting.
Goal workshop. Okay. Yeah. Councilor Carey, last word.
One of the things that's been absent in the last couple of goal setting sessions that we've had, be it a retreat or be it a confab or whatever it might be, in years past, we've had the control rod that the facilitator would turn to our city manager and would say, "Is this doable? Are we extending too far here?" And the response to that was different than it probably is now. But I think that's something that's a bit of a control rod. So we don't get into this, everybody's got 10,000 things to do because they sound like good ideas. Don't need any more good ideas. We just need people with the time to get them done. So anyway, that's just as we look to the future and the next time we do one of these, we ought to have that break.
Thanks. Speaking of break, let's take 6 minutes, 5.5 minutes before we continue with our work session item. Partly because we have cake for our retirees this evening, so I want to make sure that we aren't too long, so folks have an opportunity to share. Yes, we have cake this evening for our retirees, so we want to try and make sure we have time to get to that, and folks are invited to have some of that. So that will lead us to our work session item. I will reconvene with our Power and Light Director, Wade Carey, who also had some to-do items on the list, and you don't get to make your case to us, I guess. I guess only Suzanne did, so.
They're not as exciting as everything Suzanne has.
Okay. Thank you for that. Well, this is a new item that is coming to our attention, so we'll let Wade Carey report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you about this topic tonight. So as you are aware, for the last 3 or 4 years, Monmouth Power and Light has been updating their metering system to an advanced metering infrastructure system. AMI is the common industry term. But just for clarification, the previous system was also considered AMI, but it was a different one. It was called Power Line Carrier, and it sent the reads over the power lines versus what we have now, which is through the airwaves with radio frequencies. So this is the third rollout of an AMI system that I've been part of in my career. And so a lot of the things that came up during this, I was familiar with and fully expected. What I'm speaking to you about tonight is the idea of customers who do not want an RF enabled meter to be installed at their location. Okay, so when RF systems started to replace power line carriers in the industry, there was a lot of concern over exposure to radio frequencies, which there's many sources of that in our daily lives. And not all AMI metering systems are built the same. Some of them transmit a lot, some of them don't transmit very much. The meters themselves are different wattage and so forth. So fortunately, when I got here, the system that Monmouth Power and Light was deploying was the exact same that my previous utility had gone through and deployed. So I was very familiar with that system. So one of the advantages to an AMI system is, one, it's remote meter reading, which cuts down on our operational costs. It is more accurate as far as misreads, right? When people go out and put eyes and then have to input a number into a handheld device, there's a chance to transpose numbers, and then there's billing issues. The meters themselves will alert us when power is out at that location. So even though the meter receives its power from our grid, and if that were to go away, the meters all have the ability to send out what's referred to as a last gasp. It's a little, I'm dying here, and they'll send it out and it gets back to us, so we know when there's a power outage. In fact, just anecdotally, a few months ago during a windstorm, our lineman that was on call that night, he was sitting at his home. He heard a large wind gust. He pulled out his cell phone. He powered up the system, and he could see that there was an outage, and he was in his truck headed in long before the outage call ever came in. So that's one of the biggest benefits right there. It also allows us to give customers advanced energy use information. They can now, if requested, they can see their energy consumption in 15-minute interval data. So, which is actually, my experience being in the energy efficiency, conservation, stuff like that, that's really valuable data for people who want to know why their bill is what it is. It's also extremely helpful for commercial customers to be able to look at their usage versus their operational hours, their demand, and how to manage that. So, and then it allows us to collect data that we haven't ever had before, which allows for better engineering studies of the system. We can look at loading on certain circuits. We can look at loading on transformers. We can look at voltage. Before, we used to just see voltage at the substation. Well, now when you get all the way out to the end of a line, we can see what the voltage is all the way out to the last customer to make sure that they're receiving proper voltage as well. So AMI systems do far more than just read meters for billing. But with the RF transmission, there are some concerns. You know, people are concerned about, for the RF, they're concerned about the exposure to RF. There's also been, since the advent of these and the rollout, people have been worried about their data. Is it safe? Is it secure? And then, you know, the whole term smart meters, right? There's a lot of misinformation. There's not here, but some utilities have ran into counter campaigns for the opposition that says that there's listening devices in the meters and that there's cameras in the meters and things of that nature, which I can assure you, not only are they not there, but none of us have time to look at that anyways. So as we did the rollout, when we came across a customer who said, I don't want this meter, we said, great, we'll be back. We'll take your information, we'll collect it. We'll see how many customers we get who wish to not have the new meter. And then when we're done with the deployment, then we'll figure out what to do at that point. To date, we have 3 people who do not have 3 locations that do not have the new meters. They have the old meters, which we can still read remotely, but unfortunately, that power line carrier system is dying. That was the whole reason that we were moving forward with this new one. The old system isn't supported by the vendor, and the hardware is dying. So eventually, none of those 3 meters we'll have to go out and manually read them. In fact, if we were to do an opt-out policy, we would switch them out with a meter that isn't even branded the same, so that there's a guarantee that those meters cannot work with the RF system. So then now we're going out once a month and reading those meters for anybody who were to opt out, which of course adds cost and things of that nature. So AMI metered systems, they're all, you know, the ones that get installed, they're all approved by the FCC. They all meet regular safety requirements. The system we have operates on a 900 megahertz system, which is being used by cordless phones for 30 years. And our meters are 0.6 watts, which is typical for a handheld cell phone. And they transmit a total of 2 minutes a day, 4 times a day, about 30 seconds at a time. So that's when they send their information in, is every 6 hours. It starts at midnight or roughly there. And then every 6 hours, we get another dump of data. So from an RF exposure standpoint, the system that we have is extremely friendly in that case. And so as far as the RF exposure and the 3 opt-outs we had, that was all of the reasoning. They did not want the RF meter. And so comparative, there's a lot of data out there. I've done a lot of reading. Wi-Fi, in-home Wi-Fi is a lower wattage, but it's inside the home. And, you know, most people have Wi-Fi. Our meters are outside the house, outside the building. So it's even their exposure there is cut down. If we were to develop an opt-out, and about 50% of utilities that have AMI have gone with an opt-out policy. About 50% haven't. It just depends on the service territory, the governing board that makes the decision of why. When eWeb wanted to roll out theirs, I think they started about 7, 8 years ago. There was a massive campaign of opposition. They paused. They said, okay, we'll look at this. And just recently, within the last year or so, they've said, no opt-out. So if you want power, this is the meter you get.
And eWeb is Eugene Water and Electric Boards. We're talking
correct.
Eugene. Pretty large private system.
Yeah, they're the largest consumer-owned electric utility in Oregon, 3rd largest total, customer count-wise. So if we were to think of creating an opt-out policy, what would that look like? One, we would have to come up with some kind of fee. What would it cost to set that up? What would it cost us to manually go out and read the meter? What would we cost for manually inputting the billing data? Those kinds of things. That's a pretty standard cost breakdown for utilities that have an opt-out policy. What it would be would take some, we'd have to do some calculating. The utilities, it varies across the board, mostly because what kind of service territory. If you've got a service territory where you got to send somebody 30 minutes out to read 1 meter, the cost can be quite large. Customers who do opt out lose some services. They will not be able to see their energy data if they were ever wanted to. We would only be able to give it to them in just a monthly chunk. This is what you used. We would not have advanced outage information. Those homes would know, our locations would not be part of any kind of our ability to study, which is a very small thing. But as we have 3 now, if we were to offer an opt-out policy, we could see that number grow. So it's just some of the things to look at. You, as the governing board for Monmouth Power and Light, I wanted to bring this to you and let you know that this is a thing, that we have customers who do not want our new meters. They've asked to opt out. And if it's something you guys would want to entertain, we could do a lot more work and come back and say, with a draft policy that says this is what it is, with some draft fees of what the actual costs are to serve and those kinds of things. But really it's up to you. I've been around these long enough to know their safety factors. I've worked with the manufacturers, the companies that put these systems out. 30 seconds at a time, 4 hours or 4 times a day is very minimal exposure. Considering everything else that we have in our homes and the businesses we go. And I mean, the city itself has its own Wi-Fi hotspots. So, and if somebody were to opt out, it would just be the meter on their building. Their neighbor still has one, and so forth. So, but I wanted to make you guys aware of what the system was, what it's capable of, how much it transmits, what's that like, what the customer impacts would be, and then find out if you guys would like us to draft a policy and bring it back, or what next steps.
Okay, thoughts, Councillor Lopez and Councillor.
Thank you. Fascinating dive into into the area of energy metering. My values, I think, dictate that if people want to opt out, we should give them the option to, of course, as long as they are deferring any costs associated with that opt out. However, my question is the juice worth the squeeze, right? And so what I don't know that I have, an understanding of at this point is the amount of work that it would take to craft and implement an opt-out policy. I'm less concerned about our work, more concerned about your work and staff's work. And I also would like to keep in mind, to your point, there's 3 currently. There may actually be a greater need than the 3. So I don't want to say we're doing this just for 3 people, but considering this with a view of, maybe that's, I don't know, 10 times 3, who knows what it is. But could you give us a feel for what the work would actually entail for you and your team? A, to draft a policy, and B, to actually implement it, because those are 2 different sides of the coin, right?
Well, if we were going to do a policy, now is probably the best time, because we would have to set costs, and we've got budget season coming up, and the rate adjustment, we adopt new rates every year, miscellaneous fees. So now would be a good time to do that. To put together a policy, not that tough, because I could, I'll borrow from all the other places that I've talked to, and stuff like that. But so it's not that heavy of a list to create a policy. The procedures after the policy is put in place would require probably more work for more people, because we would have to, set a meter read date. Finance would have to set up the policy or the procedure for how they would get those and input them into the enterprise software to do the billing and those kinds of things. So it's not a huge lift. I would love to say, oh gosh, I just can't, but that's not the case at all.
So I think about these RF meters, and I think if we turned off all the routers and all the cell phones in town and think about just what we're getting from outer space and the broadcast stations around us in terms of radio frequency, it's probably considerably more than comes from one of these meters. This becomes one of those cases where there's the technical logical side and there's the emotional side. And if somebody feels strongly that the exposure from one of these meters is somehow, a problem, I guess let's let them opt out. It makes no logical sense to me, but if it makes logical or emotional sense to them, then I don't feel like I'd like to be in their way. So there you go.
Okay.
Councillor Ridgway, then Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Yeah, similar to both Councillor Lopez and Councillor Oberst, I guess the freedom to make that decision for oneself. Perception is reality. If a person has concerns about their health or about other implications, and they're willing to pay market value for a different type of service, and there's a capacity to provide that service, then I would be in favor of calculating what that cost looks like in real value, and give the person or people the opportunity to choose which one they prefer. It makes sense to offer a choice if we're capable of offering that choice.
Like my co-counselors, I agree. I think it's a good opportunity for people to make the choice. There may be a concern about opening the floodgates, and putting that aside, as long as it's not too much work, I do appreciate the opportunity to come up with a policy. And yeah, beg, borrow, steal. Look at others, ChatGPT, whatever it is, Claude. But also, we would want to then make a note if that property were to turn over. We want to make sure that we know when that happens, and then make sure that the new owner of that property was aware, this is what the previous owner had agreed to. Are you still interested in this, or can we switch over? And what the cost incentive would be for that. Because I imagine there's going to be a cost to the homeowner every month for this service.
Yeah, usually. So say somebody moved into a house, the way the fee structure would typically work is, say someone moved into a house that had an RF meter and they didn't want it, they wanted to opt out. There would more than likely be a one-time setup fee for us to go out and swap the meter, and then a monthly fee for the meter reading and the manual billing and whatnot. Some utilities have done it to where when someone moves out, who has opted out, they immediately, because they have to go out and get the meter read anyways, they immediately just swap it back to an AMI meter and go about their day. Because chances are, my last utility, when they did their opt out after the initial installation of the meters, they had close to 300 opt outs out of 40,000 meters. And last time I checked, that was down to less than 100. So as people move on and stuff, people tend to not want to pay that. But that utility also had a very steep fee given the size of the territory and what the meter reading was. So, yeah.
Councillor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So to that point, when crafting that fee to remove the meter and install the other one, that fee would then, I would assume, be inclusive of the cost of sending someone to switch it back at the back end. You charge them one fee, but you encapsulate both the cost instances because you know that it's going to happen if we were to adopt a policy like that.
I'm sorry.
So you detailed, two swap outs, right? So you've got the swap out when someone says, no, I don't want the smart meter, I want the other one. Then you have another swap out at the tail end of that service whenever they move. And so the fee that you charge at the front end should cover your costs, not just for that front end service, but also for the swap out, the second swap out at the end that you know you're going to do.
Yeah. And really The second one isn't as much because we already have to go out to get the final read when they leave. So we're already there. That's why we would automatically swap it at that time, because if we just left the non-AMI meter there, then, and somebody came in and said, oh, I don't want to pay this fee, then we would have to go back anyway. So, yeah.
So I'm just gonna say, as someone who carries this on my keys, so I don't lose my damn keys, I got an RF in my pocket every minute of the workday. I feel slightly differently about this, which is it is a lot of extra work, not staff time, but just that thought process, right? If we then we want to offer it, we got to get that communicated. We got to communicate if they're taking them out. And another one of our thought processes whenever we do this is, what about folks who feel strongly but can't afford the fee? Now how do we deal with that? So that's kind of why I'm not necessarily as worried about this as they are, and would say this is the way we gather our data. Also, if Mr. Cooper hadn't left, we could talk about water meters.
Yeah, this technology is used in gas meters and water meters. This is not in any way any type of exotic system. People have been using 900 megahertz cordless phones in their houses for decades, right? And so if these were more powerful, then that may be, or if they transmitted that's why as a utility professional, I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not saying people aren't sensitive to this, but comparative to the other things that are out there that people come in, it's a very small exposure. But
and that
again,
gas meter is a
sensitive
good point, right? Because Northwest Natural's been sweeping through our community, having contractors in the area. And I think that's what they're doing, right? Is swapping out meters.
that I don't know.
Some of that, I think, and none of us have been given an opt-out there. So anyway, but I'm hearing a majority would like you to bring back more information on an opt-out policy.
Okay, will do. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Wade. And that took the right amount of time for Suzanne to come up and just kind of catch us up on the process of our legislative amendment. I think she was back cutting cake.
Me. All right. So yes, so you just have an informational item this evening. No action is needed. This is for the test to receive the testimony that came in through the close of the written record. That was February 24th. So the actual council deliberations is scheduled for your following meeting on April 7th. So just want to make sure you had adequate time to be able to review the comments that have been received. And then I just also wanted to add, there was a staff report of frequently asked questions sheet to try to summarize some of the most common questions that we're getting and being able to respond to that. So that's all I had to report on them.
Yeah, I do appreciate the extra time for this. And if you look at that page 61 of our packet, which is the FAQ, or 61, where is that posted or available on our website? Where else is that available?
Yeah, so right now it's in the council packet, and then we can also get it posted on our city planning page as well. We have information related to each application item, so we can post it to the community development page, and I'll send out that link to you if you'd like that.
And I would also say good place if you have noticed other questions, if you notice themes or comments in the materials that we've received that you think could be addressed in that FAQ, please direct those to Suzanne as well, because we can continue to add to that on maybe some specific questions as we go forward. So,
yeah, and I did want to point out there will be a staff report for the April 7th, so there'll be additional responses and information there as well. But yes, please do reach out if there's additional questions that I can help answer.
Okay. Anything specific on this? Councillor Carey wants to say something.
I've got a couple that I'll send to you that inquiries that we don't need to get into tonight, but I guess one of the questions that I have is what will our options be when when we consider that? And if this is not an appropriate inquiry at this point, let me know. But I mean, obviously we could approve both parcels, bringing in both parcels. We could deny both parcels, areas, I'm sorry. Would we be able to choose one and not the other? And do they both need to be done at the same time?
Yeah, maybe
I
we
think
should.
that'll be better when we have legal counsel here as well with us, but we'll get into that during the deliberations. There'll be options and alternatives laid out in that staff report. So yeah, I would say hang on, there are options for that, but we need to get legal weigh in on that as well. So.
Yeah, that needs to be in the record. That needs to be as part of the actual record. So at our next meeting, I think would be the appropriate time for that.
That's fine.
Thanks. Councillor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. This is not, for clarity, a question for information tonight, rather a statement of a desire for information of an explicit nature to come during the hearing. There's been a lot of discussion about in these letters about the question of whether or not the parcel touches the city boundary. And so absolute clarity on that point would be incredibly helpful in the decision-making process. And not just clarity in terms of, I think, our assessment, but the information to back up that assessment would be appreciated. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Carey, your microphone, that you want her to be prepared to share with us? All right.
There are a couple items that I'll ask for a little more clarity on your FAQ. And I don't want to get into them now because my notes are not very good right here. But they're more clarification than anything else. But I'll send those to you quickly.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks. That's appropriate to work with staff and make sure that we all get the responses and information in the staff report for our next meeting. So thank you, Suzanne, for doing this and for compiling that and getting it out.
And thanks to Phyllis and Pam. They did a lot of work helping organize that. So yeah.
We appreciate. Good time to have 2 city recorders on staff. So, right. All right. That brings us to our reports for this evening before we get our cake break. So I will start with the mayor's report, and you should have each received a link to your statement of economic interest. It's that time of year when we have to report to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. And again, this is a public report that folks can access. And if you have questions or concerns, they have some great online trainings. Phyllis is certainly experienced at these forums, and Pam's probably following up on training that comes through our city recorder group. But we have to stop and think, right, about the kinds of activities we've engaged in, things that might have been either an economic benefit to us or a lack of economic detriment to us, to members of our household, members of our family. You've got to think that wide-ranging legal definition for individuals, groups, or activities that may have had business before us, right? So that's an important thing to look at, and learn and report for yourself. So that's that time of year, and get the questions answered if you need them. That brings me to council board and commission reports. If we've had any, I will say we have a MyNet meeting tomorrow, so I'll have more information at our next meeting on that, as MyNet also begins its budget process. Councilor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Board of Directors for the Mid Willamette Valley Council of Governments met this afternoon at noon. General discussion of previous meetings. We discussed our budget. We received an audit report for the 2024-2025 COG audit, Council of Governments audit. That was discussed at length, but approved. We received an update on the transportation program, and the one thing of interest will be, for those of you that are familiar with the Safe Routes to School program, the funding for infrastructure, which means funding for Safe Routes to School for things like sidewalks and infrastructure items, that will be delayed by a year. It will not impact the program at the Council of Governments. Just be aware that if you're thinking of doing funding near a Title I school for sidewalks, that's not going to happen for a year. We discussed rates for service. I can go over those in more detail, but there's a flexible schedule there. And I have, wearing my COG hat is different than wearing my counselor hat, because the COG hat says, yes, we need more resources, and the counselor hat says, no, we don't want to pay more. So all of that in balance. The increase is not significant. And the last thing that we discussed was the annual dinner. We had a summary. If you've received a request to fill out the summary and you attended, please fill out the questionnaire. The 25 questionnaires we received, people seemed to enjoy the event. They liked the way the raffles went. Didn't like that we ran out of ranch dressing and vegetables. But all in all, everybody was very satisfied. They enjoyed the music. They enjoyed our local adult beverage provider. So things went very, very well. People were very happy. So thank you for that.
Councilor Obert.
I promised a report from the senior board from the meeting I was unable to attend. They're working on the code of conduct for the senior center, and our meeting for this month has been canceled. So I'll have more for you in late April, early May. The tree board, we got 12 entries for the tree contest. One of them got a tree last year, so we set that name aside. Another one was the spouse of a tree board member, and if we had had less than 10 entries, or 10 exactly, they would have qualified, but because it was the spouse of a board member, we set that one aside. So we had 10 entries, so everybody gets a tree. And we're in the process right now of board members contacting winners, setting them up with the tree planting agreement. Where do you want the thing? Staking that so the city can order locates. Pick a tree. What kind of tree do you want? You want a Doug fir? You want a, that's actually on our list if somebody wanted a tree that big. Finally, we'll get around to the tree planting, which will be Saturday, the 18th of April. I ran into Athletic Director Randy Lydham, Western's Athletic Director, on Friday. And she was very excited about the prospect of supplying our labor force once again come tree planting day. So the athletes have a requirement at D2 to do some community service, and a number of them have enjoyed getting muddy with us. So away we go. That's it.
Councilor Ridgway.
Thank you. So from the Parks and Recreation Board, we just had our monthly meeting last Wednesday. A couple updates. The restroom at Monmouth Recreational Park is nearly finished. It's going to be secured with automatic locks that make sure that people are not finding residents there during our evening and nighttime hours. So that's great. Some final touches being made on that project. The project for the boardwalk near Monmouth Recreation Park and gazebo and bird watching area will be underway later this spring. Waiting for the weather to dry out significantly and having to fight the marsh and the wetlands is a little bit of a challenge. So that will be soon coming. Also, there is grant money available for through the Monmouth Recreation and Parks Board. And as of last Wednesday, there were no applicants. So there is money just sitting, waiting for somebody to come in with a great idea of how to improve our parks and recreation through a project, through an activity, through some sort of contribution that engages community. And if you have an idea, we have opportunities for you to voice that idea. More information is available on our website. Or you can contact Sabra. She's a wealth of knowledge and we'll get you connected. But yeah, otherwise the $5,000 will just go to members of the Parks and Rec Board. Just kidding. It will not. But it was also our last meeting with Russ Cooper as our staff liaison to the Parks and Rec Board. He's been on there for a long, long time. And it was bittersweet to see him leave, but also we welcomed another staff member that is our Public Works Director, and it'll be seamless, I'm sure. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And my comment on those Parks and Rec mini grants. Heed his words. Don't sleep on these. These grants have brought some amazing activity to our parks in past years. They've helped to fund the Punks in the Park program that occurred at our park. Helped to fund chess games. Helped to fund youth programs for both littles and bigger youth. They've been amazing assets. So all of you people in the audience, I know we've got a full house tonight. Please spread the word. These are an incredible community asset, and I so appreciate your influence on that board, Councilor Ridgway. My report will be short. The Homeless Alliance, the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, did not meet this month. There was a last-minute meeting cancellation due to staff illness. And then the library board, I have to sheepishly admit that with a 2.5-year-old, the time change was quite difficult, and a lot of sleepless nights after that adjustment to the little one's clock. So I was not able to make the 7 a.m. Library board meeting the week of the time change. And as soon as I have minutes, I will deliver that report to this body. Thank you.
Councilor Carey.
Planning Commission meets tomorrow night, gets their first look at the service transportation update. That's going to be coming our way at some point. It's a work session tomorrow, but it'll be coming our way, and we haven't really had much of a look at that. So when that does come to us, we'll need to drill down pretty closely.
Great, thank you. Again, our city manager, I did excuse her since she is a good thing because it's now 11:39 p.m. where she is. So, do we have any last minute council comments or announcements before cake?
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you all for coming.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Hey. Hey, it is.